Last year, Polar brought us the Grit X, and that was an amazing venture out from Polar to give us a more of an outdoor focused watch. And now they've just released the Grit X Pro model, which is the update to the original Grit X. They've taken a lot of customer feedback from the original Grit X, and they've added some really nice new features to this Pro model, which is what you'd expect. So we'll start with the main new updates to the watch and have a look at the rest of the features as well. I would start with an unboxing, but essentially it's a very similar box. It's got the watch inside, it's got a charger, a few little information documents, and that's it. So we'll skip that and get to the meaty stuff. So my favorite update, and to be honest, it's not one that you're even gonna notice straight out the box, but it's the fact that Polar have joined the bandwagon. I say join the bandwagon, we know there's a few other brands already doing this, but they've now got a Sapphire Lens display, which is really nice to see. And if you're not actually sure what Sapphire is, it's basically one of the strongest transparent minerals that we have here on Earth. There's only two stronger ones out there, one of them being diamond, and I don't think many of us could afford this watch if that was a full diamond lens. But basically the main advantage of having a sapphire lens is the fact that it's going to make that screen really, really hard to scratch. And as this is more of an outdoor focused watch to just a sport watch, so running and cycling watch, this is going to be used out in the elements, bashing up against rocks and things like that. It needs to be as scratch resistant as possible. I've been wearing this watch for a few weeks now, and once I've cleaned the screen off, you can see that that is still 100% immaculate, to be fair. There's nothing on there at all. So I'm pretty clumsy with my watch, and I'm gonna give that a 10 out of 10 for that, because there's no damage there at all. And if you're wondering what the upgrade was from, the old Grit X had a Gorilla Glass display, so it's still not bad by any means, but this is just next level. And it's probably for the best that has a screen like this, as Polar have now included over 130 sport profiles that you can specifically record in on the watch itself, which is absolutely mad. So there's some really obscure sports out there that you can record all the specific right metrics for that, whatever sport it is, out those plus 130 that you can choose from. So a really nice touch there from Polar. And on the subject of durability, Polar say that this has got some form of military grade durability standard for really heavy use. I don't think I've quite managed to test it that far, but either way, it just gives you a bit of recognition that it's not going to break down on you anytime soon. Visually, the watch looks very similar to what we saw with the Grit X. There's not many changes to there at all. It's basically the same body, but as you can see on the stainless steel bezel around the outside, it's just got a nice sort of compass imprint on the outside, which is just a nice little design touch that we didn't see on the original Grit X. And if you're interested on how the watch looks on your wrist, I know some of you are, because it's hard to get a judge of how big a watch is on the product pictures. So I've got a fairly standard 18 centimeter male wrist, and it looks like that. So hopefully that can help some of you decide whether that's going to look right on your wrist or not. Speaking of the bezel, there will be a Grit X Pro titanium model coming out, and that essentially is just, instead of stainless steel that you have on this bezel and around these little top points here, it's obviously made out of titanium instead, and titanium's a little bit stronger, as well as it being lighter, so it makes it 15% lighter. And when you get that top level watch, you also get a leather strap with it as well, which is just a nice touch. Just a quick note on the setup of the watch as well, which kind of surprised me, but when I first turned it on, the screen seemed to be really dim. So I checked the general settings, and it turns out that out the factory, the watch is set up to come with the backlight at its lowest setting. This is there probably to give it the best battery life, but I'm prepared to lose a few hours of battery life just to have that backlight up a bit more and make the screen a bit more readable and just look a bit better as well, to be fair. So a setting there that you might want to change when you get the watch yourself, but that is completely up to you. If you want to see the product pictures, a list of everything that it does, because it goes on for ages, you can just click on the link up here and find all about it there. So the original Grit X, being an outdoor watch, was lacking in that quick access sort of outdoor data that you'd want from an outdoor watch. And Polar have taken back feedback from this and have added some new outdoor specific watch faces to the Grit X Pro. So now added to the Pro version on our quick watch face screens, we've got an altimeter, a compass, location coordinates, and it's got a sunrise sunset time with dusk to dawn times on there as well, which is going to make it really handy for if you're up against the clock getting back before dark. So some really nice new features there. And that's alongside all the other screens that you had on there before. So you've obviously got the time and date screen, your daily activity, your cardio load status, which is something Polar have always done really well, your continuous heart rate tracking, latest training sessions, your nightly recharge screen, which we'll have a look at later, training guides, a weather screen, which again can be really handy if you're wondering to go out or not, your weekly summary, and your music controls too. And it's worth saying as well that you can go onto this screen here, and if you're never going to use some of those functions and it's just cluttering up your watch faces, you can add and remove whichever ones you want just to clean up the watch and make it more specific to the stuff that you need to use day to day. Speaking of the screen, you've still got that 1.2 inch 240 by 240 color display in there. Like most other Polar watches too, the screen's touch screen, so you can swipe through your watch faces and your activities and basically whatever you're in. I basically never use this feature, and I find the buttons much easier to use, especially if I'm in an activity. If you're trying to control the screen whilst you're running or cycling by using the touch screen, I'm gonna say it's next to impossible. It might just be me, but the buttons are so much easier to use. It does actually come with an anti-finger smudging protection layer on there. God knows what that is, and as I don't use the touch screen, it doesn't help in that regard. But on the other positive note, the screen never seems to get particularly dirty. I think it just repels dirt as a whole. So a really nice feature, even if you're not going to use that thick touchscreen display, it's going to be helpful for just keeping the screen nice and clean anyway. As I said, I don't use the touchscreen very much, but the buttons on this thing are absolutely phenomenal. I really like them, and they're probably my favorite sport watch buttons that I've ever used. And that's for multiple reasons. So that they just give a really big positive click. So even when you're in an activity and you're running and you're not sure whether you press the buttons or not on some watches, you can really feel that positive click when you're pausing or whatever you're doing. It's really obvious that you're clicking the button. They're really big and they've got a really nice textured finish on there. So even when you're out running around and you're in the rain or you've got really sweaty hands, once you've got your fingers locked onto those buttons, they're not going anywhere, which it sounds really silly, but it makes quite a big difference when you're out on the move. And lastly, this is probably not going to sound very amazing, but it feels great in your hand. But when you've got your finger on the button is fully rotatable. It can twist 360 degrees all the way around as many times as you want. And I think that's what gives it so much grip, because if you're running and you're moving, your finger's still locked onto that button and it can twist around. I mean, I've been rattling on about these buttons for too long, but they just feel great in hand. Trust me on that, they're really good. Speaking of using it in the wet and the rain, and obviously swimming that this can do as well, this has got a waterproof rating of ATM 10. So that's actually 100 meters submerged underwater. So this is going to be absolutely fine for all your swimming you're going to do, but it's probably not going to do quite scuba diving. But if you're going to be going scuba diving, you probably want a more specialist watch anyway. So daily showers and everything like that's going to cope with absolutely no problem. The one thing I would say is that because it's got that touch screen, sometimes, especially if you're in a kind of a warm shower, the shower and the beads of water can actually change the watch face. So there's a hack to this as well. So you can just hold down this top right hand button and it puts the whole watch into a locked mode. So none of the buttons, or you can't do anything with the watch really until you hold that button again just for a second and it unlocks the watch. So if you're going swimming or you're doing a really hectic climbing activity, then putting the watch into lock mode, you just know you're not going to accidentally press any buttons or change any settings. So a nice bit of intel there for you. Being an outdoor watch, you might be using this in extreme outdoor conditions, or you might just be using it in the office, who knows? But it's going to have to deal with those scenarios one way or another. So it can deal with temperatures of -20 all the way up to +50. So that's going to pretty much deal with almost all the situations that you're going to use this watch in. So again, it's just going to be nice and suitable for even those extreme expeditions that you're doing. Moving to the battery life of the Grit X Pro, I think it's very similar to what we had in the Grit X. It's going to give you about 7 days of use without recording any activities or using any GPS data, but that's with, you know, continuous heart rate tracking and everything else on. But if you're going to be using it with full GPS and heart rate tracking on in an activity, for example, non-stop, it's going to have 40 hours tracking at its highest tracking abilities in there. So you're going to be able to do a 40-hour activity non-stop recorded and not have to think about it, which is nice to know. And with some power saving options and some data not being recorded, like dropping your heart rate and stuff like that, you can get up to 100 hours GPS tracking. So if you're going to be going on a big expedition or a huge multi-day run cycle, you're going to be able to use this to track where you're going, but maybe not all of the in-depth data that Polar have to offer. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts between what you need, how long you're going out for, and blah, 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 blah. But you get the idea. The battery life is pretty good in this watch. So moving on to the heart rate sensor on the Grit X Pro. I mean, Polar are renowned for making really top tier heart rate monitors. I think they were the first company in the world to even make a heart rate monitor, so that says a lot. On the Grit X Pro, we've got the Precision Prime heart rate monitor, which I think is the best one that they make for a wrist reading device. And it gives you really astonishingly accurate data from a wrist heart rate monitor. And I mean, it's getting so close to the data you get from a chest monitor. So the actual reason to wear a chest monitor is getting further away from having to wear one. But there's a few things that I like about it. First, is just the shape that Polar make their watches. So you can see it's got that sort of concave, domed look, which means that that heart rate monitor is going to it's going to have the best contact with the back of your wrist there. And you can imagine that if you're doing an activity, your arm and your wrists are all moving. So if it doesn't have that domed shape, you're going to be lifting that heart rate monitor away from your wrist, if you can imagine that. So I've always really liked the way Polar design their watches with, you know, thought in mind, just to get the best data, which is why you buy these watches. So a nice design and a fantastic heart rate monitor from Polar, which is really good. And just a few fun facts on how these actual heart rate monitors work. So as you can see here, you've got 10 LEDs that are flashing away, and you've got red, infrared, green and yellow frequencies. And basically all these different colors are going to penetrate different skin tones and be able to get much better readings from your heart rate through your skin. And then it reads your heart rate from 4 light detectors that sense the light returning back. And that, in a very small nutshell, is how these heart rate monitors work. As we're around this heart rate monitor area, you'll be happy to know that it keeps that 4 electrode charging cable, which I've got here. As much as I hate every watch having its own proprietary charger, I do really like the Polar one. And that's because it's just a really nice functionality where it just connects to that really easily and then charges really simply. And it just a nice magnetic feature, just a nice charger basically. But it doesn't have like a USB port. Imagine that, where all the sweat and grime that you get from your activity is going to pack up in this port, and then you're going to try and push a cable into it, and it's just going to A, not charge, B, get everything all dirty and break stuff. So the fact that they've got this system is brilliant because it never clogs up. Simple to use, never clogs up, charges really quickly, win. One thing that's nice to see in the Grit X Pro, we saw it in the Grit X as well, is that it has some navigation on there. This is run through Komoot, and I'm really happy about that because I use that service all the time. You can get world maps for a really cheap price and use it forever without being in a subscription, which is obviously very different to a lot of the other platforms and companies out there. And just to put it out there as well, Komoot's maps are so detailed. You can choose between the types of running, hiking, cycling, gravel, road, all the disciplines are all there, and it gives you some really good data to allow you to pick the right trail, road, whatever it is in front. So a really good platform. You make your route on there, and then it automatically, once you've set it up in the watch, will just sync up to the watch. So for example, we'll choose the cycling sport profile. You click on the setting icon up here. You can just scroll down to routes, and then you can just see all your routes listed here. So we can just click the one we want to do. As simple as that. When you go on your ride, you're going to have a fairly simple breadcrumb route to follow. You just hit start, off you go, and then you're going to get a nice turn-by-turn breadcrumb navigation of the route in front of you, which is just really nice to see. It's also got a few navigation features as well, like find your way home. I don't think these are in the Grit X, so it's nice to see that you've got a few more options with where you can go and where you want to go en route, and it just helps you out if you don't have a phone on you, which is a really nice touch. And also if you're going to be doing a lot of elevation and you want to know what's coming up, you can just scroll down 2 buttons. It takes you to the elevation screen, gives you that side profile of the elevation that you've done, you've got to go, probably more importantly. It's just a really nice feature, so you can have more information on the trail ahead really. So a really nice feature there. The Grit X Pro, just like a lot of the other Polar watches, has got automatic sleep tracking. It's a brilliant feature and it's done really well, better than a lot of the competition if you ask me. And it gives you some really simplistic recordings of how well it thinks you've slept, which are nice just to glance at, but then like Polar always do, you can really deep dive into all the information and have a look at how much deep sleep you've had, how much resting eye movement you've had, how much interruptions you've had. And you can see this briefly on the watch face on the sleep screen, but it's much better just to jump into Polar Flow and you can see a lot more of the data on a big screen. On this topic actually, and it's something that I hate about a lot of smartwatches that don't give you this as an option, is that when you sleep with a watch, the last thing you want it to do is start buzzing off and lighting up when you're trying to go to sleep, because it's obviously just going to wake you up. So you can have a do not disturb time zone. So you can say from after 11 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning, I do not want this watch to beep at me, vibrate at me, light up at me for any notification that's coming through. So it's a really nice feature that you can just have that good night's sleep. I suppose I haven't even mentioned the fact that this obviously pulls through basically every notification from your phone if you wanted to. So I think basically every notification that would buzz up on your phone, whether it's an email, a WhatsApp, notification about anything, it will pop up on here if you want it to. So nice feature if you wanted to do that. Very easy to turn it off if you don't. Win-win either way, I suppose. If you're a paying subscribed Strava customer, then you'll be happy to know that you can have all your Strava live segments come through and pull straight to the watch face here. Polar are great at pushing loads of new tests that you can do on their devices, and they're adding to this. Featured on the Grit X Pro, you've got the orthostatic test, you've got a leg recovery test, a cycling test, a running test, and my favorite, which is a fitness test. And that's going to give you a good estimate of where your Vo2 Max is. We've actually made a video on that, so that will pop out on the screen somewhere, I'm sure, in a second. But what's cool about that is that in the past, that was a really hard figure to get an estimation of, and to get it accurately, you'd have to be hooked up to a machine and do all these sort of tests. With this, you just have to turn it on, lie down for a few minutes, and it all works out for you. So a lot cheaper and a lot more simple to do. So it's got FuelWise on there. We've seen that in a lot of the newer Polar watches, and it's a really good feature if you're not very good at fueling yourself, for example. So it's not just fueling, it's hydration too. So the watch can buzz through and let you know when the best time is to take a swig of water, take a nibble of your energy bar, or however you're gonna fuel yourself. It's gonna A, help people that aren't very good at it, and B, really, for all the training geeks out there that wanna get it just right, it's gonna help you perform as well as you can on race day. It's got music controls on the watch, so if you've got a phone tucked away somewhere that you don't want to get out during an activity that you're playing music through, you can change the song volume and stuff like that through the watch itself. So just a nice little touch there. The Grit X Pro is going to come in 3 colorways, so it's going to come in a coppery one, the black one, which is definitely my favorite just because I like a nice stealthy object like this, and then a gold version too. And then it's also going to come in the titanium version, which comes in that titanium colorway basically with the 2 watch straps. As well as this, once you've got the watch, you can customize it with a heap of different straps, and those straps are from Polar themselves, so they do a whole range of the straps that you can see here. They're really easy to change. If you just turn the watch over on its back, you see these little tabs here, you just pull them and the strap comes off really simply. It's really nice to see Polar doing this, because on some of their other models you actually can't change the strap, which is really annoying because A, you can't make it look how you want, and B, if the strap does get damaged, then if it's all a one-piece unit where the watch unit and the strap are as one, then it's a much more laborious, tricky process of getting the watch repaired and all that sort of stuff. So just a much better system that we got on the Grit X Pro here. So what do you think of the new Grit X Pro? Is it a worthy predecessor of the Grit X? Do you like all the updates to it? Is there anything they've missed? Let me know what you think to it in the comments below, and do you think it will be your next smartwatch? As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.